discussing Saifedean Ammous, The Principles of Economics. Saifedean just published the book, and he gave about 1.5 hour introduction to the book on his podcast channel. So that's my knowledge of the book. I haven't read the book, but I think I've been following Saifedean enough. I understand enough of Austrian economics to be able to discuss the book already. I will read the book, of course, and then have a more formal conversation about it. But let's for now, just for, so I can bring this out, let's discuss some of the main points and in particular the criticism. Let's give the punchline first. So my main criticism with Saifedean and Austrian economics is the concept of time as being the ultimate scarcity. And here's why. I think the ultimate scarcity is not time, but the number of iterations that you can have as a human. In other words, if you do the same thing for 10 years, then yeah, you have 10 years, but doing the same thing for 10 years is not going to make anything better or worse for you. It's going to make it worse, most likely. It goes back to the old Einstein quote, I don't know if it's true, if he said that, which is, if you keep doing the same thing, expecting different results, you're crazy, or something along those lines. What that means is that in order to compound interest, in order to compound wealth, in order to achieve anything in life, progress, or as Saifedean says in the book, if the ultimate goal is to leave a better world for our children than what we have to be able to iterate. So the ultimate scarce resource for humanity is the number of iteration, and it's not time. Time is part of that. I don't have a closed down formula for what it actually means or anything like that. However, I have a good sense for what it means to improve the conditions of humans. What does it mean to improve the human condition? Well, it means you have to create knowledge. It means you have to liberate yourself from doing one thing so you can do another thing. And the more other things you can do, the more iteration, the more try and error you can do in life, the higher the likelihood of a good outcome. And a good outcome is something that David Deutsch calls create knowledge, something that solves problems that persists over time. This is what you want. The only way to get there is by iterating a lot. I think if you look at life as a function of iterations, in other words, the more you can iterate, the better your chances of positive outcome. You have a couple of variables that come into place, in particular knowledge creation, liberty, time. All of these variables matter, but time's not the only thing. If you can have all the time in the world in North Korea, it's not going to help you. I mean, it's actually going to make it even worse. The more time they have to torture you, the more they will torture you. So that's the thing. But if you look at life from an iterative perspective, so how many more iterations can we actually get? And then how do we increase? This is the thing. Like, from an economics perspective, if you advise the president of Singapore, okay, what do I want? How about you increase the potential for iterations in your society? Well, how do I do that? Okay, well, let's start with education, knowledge. The more knowledge you have, the more you can iterate. Why? Well, because you can find ways to solve problems. And one of the problems you can solve is how to save somebody from doing something. You can make it faster. In ChatGPT, if you talk to, let's say, the people at Ilya, who's the mastermind of it, the first thing they all say is it makes me more productive. What is productivity? It's output divided by time. So you see, productivity is a function of time, but it's not time itself. If you don't have more output, then time is kind of useless, right? It's 0 divided by time is 0. You have to have more output. How do you get more output? Well, you can iterate more, you can try more, and that's really what it's all about. So it's kind of like, I think that would be my biggest criticism. So what am I going to do here now? I'm going to discuss the book. For people who are interested in the book, I think it's worth just discussing the book no matter what. And then I'm going to talk about this iteration principle, which I think is a better way to define scarcity, and therefore a better way to do economics, because economics is the study of how to allocate resources towards scarcity. And if scarcity is the number of iteration, then I think you will get to better results. So this is the Not Even Wrong podcast. It's May 20th, 2023. This is Cryptelco. Since the last update, we're up 10%. The market's up 2%. For the year, we're up 48.3%. The market's up 9.2%. We're outperforming by 39.1%. Just before I go into the conversation, the Tesla shareholder day was pretty successful, and I think two big news items came out of there. Number one, Musk did not announce that he's going to step down as CEO, which would be considered negative by the market. And second, they reiterated their leadership in AI and in manufacturing, and also expanded their horizon when it comes to growth and things like gigafactories and all that stuff. So if you put all of this together, I think Tesla is just in a much better position than most competitors. And I think from a competitive perspective, that is, of course, a very powerful thing for investors. And I think that's why the stock is rebounding. From our perspective, of course, the valuation and the potential and all of these things are not even close to realized, and therefore we're still long Tesla. Largest position in the portfolio. Our other position is Nvidia, which has also done pretty well, in particular because they announced a low-cost GPU, which will expand their market and also make it more difficult for competitors to compete, which is, from an investment perspective, of course, a very strong thing, because whenever you have low-cost options, you then improve the adoption, and adoption increases the ability for people to try, and if they try and think that it's a good idea to have this type of technology, then next thing you know, it gets adopted more, the prices go down, costs come down, volumes go up, and we have a virtuous circle. Let's talk about the Principles of Economics by Saifedean Ammous. Saifedean wrote a book that he just published called Principles of Economics. It's a book that summarizes the Austrian School of Economics in a concise and approachable way. These are his words, because the concept of Austrian economics has been lost over the last 100 years. Now, if you look at the history of economic thought, I think you will not find a clear-cut answer for why that happened. And some people might say, well, it was just wrong. Other people might say it was sort of stepped aside by the Keynesian economic school. Saifedean's conclusion of the book actually is that we have a new evil species called the government, which he compares to, let's say, the lions or the Vikings, or whatever humans had to deal with over the millennia that humans exist. They always had to deal with a force that was dangerous to the livelihood of the human species. Like, that's why the lion, the tiger, the snake. And then we learned how to contain those. And then we had to deal with, let's say, other tribes, the Persian conquerors and the Egyptian and the Greek and Alexander the Great and the Ottoman Empire. All these empires were always bad for people. Now, why were they bad for people? Because they inhibit the most important function of a society, which is to develop civilization and create a better future for your kids. That's what they, if you're surrounded by tigers and wolves all the time, you will have a hard time accumulating capital, and accumulating capital is the fundamental vector that drives improvement of civilization. This is, again, I'm paraphrasing the book here. Some of it is my opinion, some isn't. But I don't want to always caveat, this is a quote, this is my opinion, and all that stuff. So let me just paraphrase the book and throw in my opinions whenever I do, and then I'll say it. Okay, so this is how this is going to go in this particular episode. So anyway, let's go back. So the ultimate reason for economics, the ultimate reason for the activity of humans on Earth is to leave a better place for our next generations. This is the purpose, okay? So the purpose is not to have a better life in heaven. The purpose is not, like, let's say, Max Weber and the Protestants said that somehow God wants us to be good on earth or any of that stuff. The purpose of life is to leave a better place for our children. And I think I agree with that. So this is me agreeing with Saifedean's conclusion of the book. Back to the book. Now, in order to achieve that, we need to create knowledge. We need to create a technology. We need to engineer that. This is not just going to happen. This is in line with David Deutsch, with Popper. Like, we have to do something to make that happen. I mean, life, the photons and the laws of physics and the interactions between elementary particles and emergent factors that come from there are not designed in a way to create a better civilization for humans. We have to have agency. This is incredibly important when it comes to also my essay I'm writing, Turing's Error, which discusses the emergence of intelligence. And one of the biggest achievements of Intelligence 2.0, which is what we are, what humans are, is that we've been able to move the Intelligence 1.0, which is evolution, towards agency. So agency is important. Agency just means, well, you can do stuff that actually helps you right now, or you can create knowledge on demand, right? So this is what agency means. Anyway, back to the book. So analyzing economics requires know-how, knowledge, and there's tools and principles, and that's what the book's for. Now, Saifedean goes through the chapters. I encourage people to read the book, so let's not go too deep here, but it really starts with the foundation, which is human action. And it sounds as like an abstract thing, but I think it's more important than it sounds, because it just wants to put the human. The human is the unit of analysis here. So if you want to use sort of the language of modern AI, and in particular large language models, when they say we tokenize a model, what it means is, okay, the token is the unit of analysis. It could be a word in a large language model. It could be a letter in a large language model. This is the unit of analysis. So when we take a body of text, let's say, that we try to analyze and learn from, we have to parse it in some sort of way. And the way it's parsed is let's say, in words. And then you learn the relationship between the words. So the way Austrian economics parses the activity that we call economics, is it parses it into humans and their actions. So it's sort of, if you want to be really fancy here, if you want to use the physics analogy, it is the human and her position and her momentum, right? So it's the action, it's the where is she now and what is she going to do. This is what economics is all about. And then we try to analyze, okay, on the question of what is she going to do, we're going to try to answer that by using tools such as utility, value, scarcity. And that's what the book is all about. So what is utility? It's just something that makes you happy, something you want, right? We assume, this is an assumption, that people have agency enough to figure out what they want. Okay, you want to date that girl. Like, that's not something that was predetermined by the Big Bang. It's something you choose to do. Random or not, doesn't matter. You want to go and study nuclear physics at Stanford. That's something you choose to do. It wasn't predetermined, predestined. God didn't want you to do it. It's you. These are all assumptions. We could be wrong about this, but we have to work with something, right? So these are assumptions that Austrian economics is based on, and obviously, and this is now my opinion, it works pretty well. So I'm pretty happy with it, and I assume it's true, and I second all these assumptions. So I support them. Now, Saifedean goes on and talks about money, and this is, of course, very dear to his heart, with somebody who wrote two books about money. One is called The Bitcoin Standard, the other The Fiat Standard, both highly recommended. But I guess he has a point of view. He has a perspective, and the perspective is money, because he thinks that money is the source of the business cycle. In other words, money is the source of all evil when it comes to problems in the economy and so on and so forth. Now, this is his point of view. I don't particularly agree with that. I agree with that to some extent, because I think money can definitely distort the economy by a lot. However, I also believe that it's really about other things, and that's what I'm going to conclude this episode with. It is about knowledge. It is about iteration. It is about freedom. That's what matters the most. And of course, money can inhibit freedom, and therefore money is very closely related to the concept of dealing with this most scarce factor, which is the number of iterations that humans can do in a lifetime. Now let's talk a little bit more about money. And now this is my sort of interpretation of what Saifedean is saying. Money is a software which allocates labor, and it can be edited by the government. That's why the government is dangerous. That's why the government has power. That's why the Fed and all of these things are a problem, because they have the ability to edit the software which allocates labor, which fundamentally also allocates the number of iterations that you can do as a human, and therefore is directly related to the end goal, which is to create a better civilization, defined as a place that is better than what we inherited from our generations, from our previous generations. So again, money is important, not necessarily because of its nature. We could have a money that is scarce, such as Bitcoin, or we could have even money which is run by the Fed. Technically, it doesn't matter how much money we have. That's true. I agree with that. And it doesn't even matter how we allocate money. We could allocate money. We could say we add a little bit of money every year to the economy. We could do that as long as it's clear. You see, the problem is as long as the rule is clear and the rule can't be changed. As long as that's given, then money is fine. The problem is when the rule can be changed, and this is very, very fundamental. Because there is a way to change the rule of how money is allocated. Let's say in our system with the Fed, certainly there is one because the Fed decides it. There's also, let's say, Ethereum has that. Ethereum is a system that is not ruled by anybody until it is, right? So meaning they can, if they really want to, they can interfere, which they did already, and that's why Bitcoiners are against Ethereum. So as long as you have humans deciding of how to allocate money, that particular money is not good. And that's why Satoshi Nakamoto created Bitcoin, because it is an inherent system that doesn't allow humans to interfere with the actual allocation of money. So is money fixed, not fixed, doesn't matter. Bitcoin's a rule-based money supply that at some point becomes scarce, and that's it. So I agree with that, and I particularly agree with the political aspect of it. So as long as money is political, it's bad, and therefore our fiat money currently is bad. I 100% agree with that, because the benefits, whatever they may be, which are, if you ask me, highly contested anyway, but they by no means outweigh the risk of manipulation of this type of software, manipulation that money is. Again, if money is software that allocates labor, if you can edit that software, you have power, and that's a bad thing. Now, let me get to my conclusion why all of this is bad. And again, my criticism of the book, the only big sort of question mark I have with Saifedean, well, I have two. One, relevant to this conversation, the other, not so relevant. I'm going to throw it in, just, his obsession with fossil fuels. I know why he's obsessed with it, because he wants to sort of counter contemporary politically, the democratic sort of obsession with the environment. But I still think it's wrong, because I think we can actually improve our flexibility and our iteration and all of these things by innovating along better forms of energy and power. And therefore we should not be stuck with fossil fuels. And it's okay to try to steer our research and development and all of these things towards better sources of energy. There's nothing wrong with that. And I don't understand why these people, it's okay to develop knowledge with let's say nutrition. Why is it a God-given conclusion that we should eat meat all the time? I don't understand that obsession. I mean, they're not consistent. People like Saifedean and Jordan Peterson, all these meat-eating fanatics, they're not consistent with their own premise, which is, a market of ideas, free markets, free ideas, free all. Peterson is obsessed with free speech, but then he somehow knowledge when it comes to nutrition or energy, that's not supposed to happen. Like we should just use fossil fuels and eat meat. That's it. There's no development on that front. So I just disagree with that. But that will be the first disagreement, which is not relevant to this conversation. The other big disagreement, which is relevant to the principle of economics, is that the ultimate scarcity is the number of iterations a human has. It's not time. Time is part of it, but the number of iterations, it's really number of iterations per unit of time. So time is part of it, but again, if I'm in North Korea, I can waste the whole lifetime doing that. If you're in a solitary cell somewhere, well, you have a lot of time, but you can't do anything, so it's really a waste. And the number of iterations, in other words, or the other way around, you can have very little time. A startup, a bunch of crazy, people working on something, they have very little time because they're running out of cash, but they iterate like crazy. Try and error, do this, fail, do this, fail. And they win because they iterate fast. So again, it's iteration per unit of time. And that to me is the ultimate scarcity. And this might sound like semantics for some people. It's not, trust me, because once you take the word of iteration and take it seriously, and we don't want to be Wittgensteinian here, so it's not about what does it mean to be iterating, none of that stuff. Iterating is the thing that allows you to try and fail and try and fail. The way you iterate is, so iteration itself is a science. It's a know-how. You need to know how to iterate. For example, you don't want to iterate in a way that kills you if you make a mistake. That's not a good way of iterating. You want to iterate in a way that allows you to get up from your knees once you fail and keep going at it. You also want to iterate in a way that the cost of error correction is very low. In other words, you don't want to iterate around nuclear power too much. That's why nuclear power is a bad idea, because iteration is very difficult. And if you make a mistake, you blow up the world. Not so good. You don't want to iterate about intelligence 3.0 too much, which is what we have now with chatbots. Because once, like I say in my essay, malicious AI is a cliff. Once you pass that cliff, it's pretty scary. And the reason it's malicious, well, it's because it's manipulating humans. And you don't want to iterate too much around that too, because once the genie's out of the bottle, it's going to be very hard to put it back in. So again, let's work on technologies where we can iterate fast, where mistakes don't kill us, and where we can fix the error with very low cost. So that's like, if you want to advise the president of Singapore of how to create an economy that is successful, that creates wealth, or in Saifedean's words, creates a better future for the future generations, you want to increase the iterability. I don't know if that's a word. If not, I'll just create it, iterability. And how do you increase iterability? Well, it starts with education. So some of the stuff, it's not like I'm reinventing the wheel here. I mean, people have figured out that education is key, but what kind of education? How about that? There's education that increases iterability and education that decreases. Critical race theory, gender studies. They're not in the business of increasing iterability. In fact, they want to reverse the wheel. Everything is about power and stuff. We've been there with Marx, like 150 years ago. Enough already. Like, come up with new things. Like, find ways. If you wanna fund a university, let's say you're a rich person and you want to start a university, make it so it can iterate fast. Make it so it can do lots of things and try and fail, and that's what's going to increase knowledge. And how do you do that? You see, now all of a sudden things are falling into place. Well, you have a lot of iterability if you can increase knowledge, and the way you increase knowledge, the best way is by having as much freedom as possible. And it's based on liberty. Okay, liberty is the philosophical underpin of freedom, which means it means you can do things without being coerced into doing them. And the result of that is freedom. So you can you can act voluntarily within the framework of norms, within the framework of the law. These are fine. I'm not an anarchist by any means. Actually, it helps to have constraints. Freedom can be constrained. I said liberty is about coercion. About non-coercion, not non-constraints. Constraints are good. In many ways, John Mackey, founder of CFO, said, constraints are an opportunity. If your constraint is that you don't have enough sustainably caught salmon, well, then solve that problem. Create knowledge of how to sustainably catch salmon. One way is to increase the price, but maybe there's better ways, so you can democratize salmon a bit by finding ways to iteratively get to a place where you can literally catch more sustainably catch more salmon. So my point here is that constraints are good. Constraints are not bad. Coercion is bad. So to summarize, the Saifedean Ammous Saifedean's book, The Principle of Economics, highly recommended, very important book, should be read by everybody in the economics field, but also everybody else. By the way, I didn't even mention this now in the discussion, but he's also clearly making the point that that this whole Keynesian conversation is a dud, and it is, because Keynes was, in my point of view, he really was close to evil. But he suggests things that he knew make no sense. Somehow people listened to him. He put society in a position, I would say, in a very tough spot, where he gave greedy politicians, socialists, all those types of people, the tools to amass power. I mean, he probably knew that, and he still did it. And I don't know why he did it, and it doesn't matter. I mean, this is a political conversation. I think it has to do with wokeism today. It's very similar, and it is what it is. Doesn't matter. But definitely refuting Keynes is important. Every economist should spend his or her time, at least a bunch of his or her time, thinking deeply about how to refute Keynes. It's a very important task to be fulfilled. And the reason it's important is for the simple fact, like I said in the beginning, because Keynes advocates for monopolizing money, and monopolizing money is bad because it allows governments to amass power, and governments and amassing power is a bad thing. And I think we discussed this already in the concept of freedom and liberty. But the point here is, so this book is very important because it refutes Keynes by going from first principle. He's not mentioning Keynes in the book, but he's just from first principle trying to understand what is this all about, and then giving you a conclusion that you can make yourself, and then you will refute Keynes automatically. But the point here, again, the book is about human action, which is the fundamental source of knowledge creation in economics, is understanding human action. It's about utility and value. He talks about money and how money is created, and how money can be best managed by being scarce and having rules of how it's being allocated. And those rules cannot be changed, such as Bitcoin. And fundamentally, my criticism of Saifedean Ammous and the Austrian economic school, as it is taught today, is that the ultimate unit of scarcity is not time, it is the iterability. It's how many times can we iterate. This is what's scarce, and we should work towards increasing that. The way we do that is by creating knowledge, by setting liberty as the foundation of a society, so we can have freedom and the creation of knowledge, which are two sides of the same coin. Thank you.